Hello, everyone. We were supposed to be doing an episode with Bharat, but unfortunately, after an ice cream related incident, I think it was ice cream, maybe it was yogurt. I think it was ice cream. We couldn't record with him last night, and then today he hasn't been able to get his Wi-Fi to work. So, if you have been waiting on for the chat forever, I'd like to apologize, but that's all it was. We were just waiting for Bharat's Wi-Fi situation to be fixed or his 4G situation to work. Unfortunately, neither of them did. So, because a lot of you have been waiting on, just wanted to apologize to everyone. But if you want to ask any questions, you can. I see there's just a couple in here that we can go through very, very quickly. But yeah, just for those of you who want to, who were waiting, we just do a quick show with me again, sadly on my own. Sorry about that. But DM95 says rumors are Travis Head might open. I don't see how it works personally. Opening for the first time ever in India. Yeah, it's a weird one. I'm not sure how serious it is at this stage. It might, it's possible they're thinking about it. I would have assumed that the thought pattern behind it is, especially in the first innings, is perhaps you can get him in to batting for a little while, get him feeling into his innings, maybe slash some boundaries away before the spinners come on. In the second innings, he's probably going to face spinners from ball one anyway, so I'm not sure the logic really, really holds. But I can certainly see why. I can see why it's being mooted, but in order to do that, you have to drop. Well, you either have to move Warner or Kawaja down the order, which both seem a little bit odd, or you have to drop one of them. Again, that seems a little bit odd on the back of one test. But think this, you know, you go through the history of Test cricket, and what you realize is so often that teams go on a tour where they don't have the exact right tools available for them, and they just try as many different things as possible, right? And it does feel in this case that Travis Head opening would be one of those. Yeah. It would be an incredible, scenes for that to happen, and it would be a lot of fun. But I, I think it's probably something at the moment they're talking about, but I'm not sure I'd put money on it happening. I don't know if you can bet on who opens a batting. You probably can't. Well, certainly not with any bookie you should trust. Um, but uh, but yeah, I would think it's probably one of those third test, fourth test things that you might see. Second test, it feels like a huge swing. But then again, if they think they're miles behind, I don't know. I perhaps that is something else. Uh, just seeing. If you've got any other questions while I'm here. Here we go. Sebastian says, can they drop Lyon? Yes, I think they can drop Lyon. I don't think you would drop him based on that bowling performance. I know he was pretty poor in that first innings. Was not first innings, the first part of the innings. I thought he actually bowled fairly well after that. If you're dropping him, you're going to have to be pretty sure that the other bowlers can do a better job. Ashwin Agar's not a better bowler than Nathan Lyon. Kuhneman certainly not a better bowler than Nathan Lyon. So unless you're thinking that Lyon his confidence is gone, or there's an injury holding him back, I wouldn't think again for the second test they would drop him. We have seen him take wickets in India before. He's certainly a probing threat, if that makes sense. So in a way that if you compare him to, say, someone like Will Somerville when he played for New Zealand, Somerville was there as a person so that AJ Patel could bowl at the other end. Nathan Lyon is certainly doing more of a job than that. Even if he didn't, go on to get as many wickets as he should have in that first innings, he certainly got the ball to move off the straight, cause some issues, mishits, plays and misses, and all those sorts of things. So from that perspective, I would have thought we can get a little bit fixated with actual wickets. Remember, Murphy got 2 absolutely dog wickets. Like if Lyon gets the dog wickets instead of Murphy, are we really talking about dropping Lyon? And I think if I was doing it, I'd be looking at just how well he bowled, unemotionally going back through it. My memory, and I haven't done a rewatch, obviously, and I don't have the ability to just press something on my iPad that allows me to watch all of Nathan Lyon's deliveries. But if I did, I don't think I'd be watching that as a selector or as coach or anyone else and thinking that was someone who immediately needs to be dropped. The bigger issues, of course, that we've talked about a lot, quite a few times before, is that he doesn't take wickets in Asia. So you can see from that perspective that it's certainly worth It's worth thinking about, but you know, I don't think I would do it. I'd have to be pretty confident that the next bowler was going to do something better. Avinash says, "Will Virat Kohli score in the second test?" I'll just get out my magic 8 ball. I mean, questions like this. I mean, I'm not really sure what you want me to say. He could get run out. He could, I don't know, fall over and trip on his dick on the way out and injure himself and have to go to hospital and get, an emergency operation on it. Do you know what I mean? I have no idea. I wouldn't be too worried about how he played in the first innings. I think he came out when the wicket was a little bit tricky and he got caught down the leg side in what was, it certainly, I don't think it was a plan or anything. I think it was just a poor ball, a bit like Pujara's one. And, I wonder how many times you would be caught playing a similar shot from that. I don't think it's that often, if we're really being honest. So I'm not too worried about him. Should Gill replace Rahul as the opener if Shreyas Iyer is fit and replaces Surya? I don't have a huge dog in the Gill Rahul fight for opener. I like Shubman Gill. I kind of think that it's at home. Give him some opportunities to open. Like it really depends on what they think about Rahul, because at the moment he's got this leadership position. He doesn't play any first class cricket. It's ridiculous. So many, I wonder if the same thing is going to happen to Shreyas Iyer. It's going to happen to Umesh Yadav. It's going to happen to Gill. It's going to happen to Sarfraz if he gets in the team. Prithvi Shaw if he gets in the team. These guys get into the team with these incredible first class numbers. Oh, did I lose that? Sorry, Anand. And then they disappear from first class cricket. And the only time they play it is like when they're facing test teams in front of everyone. And if you get out of form, I wonder how you get back into form. Anyway, I'm doing a video on Rahul. I think that's really interesting. If Shubman Gill and Shreyas Iyer played in the next game, I think for me, I wonder if those are the better versions of the players who have played. But it really does depend on Rahul. Here's a very, very interesting one I've just found out. It's the second best record of an Asian opener in England since 2000. Of Asian openers who played 4 tests. Rohit's got a better record than him. I think Rohit averages high 40s, I think. He averages high 30s. And it's the second best. When we talk about throwing away a player, we have to really, factor in everything. So there's a video coming up on Rahul shortly, but I'm not really comparing him to Shubman Gill. But I'm having a look at some of the reasons India have picked him, but also some of the reasons that his average is lower than it probably should be. It's remarkable how little he's played at home, for instance. Not if you're going to play Test cricket, I suggest trying to play it at home as often as possible. That would be my that would be my one thing. Amal says, rumors are that Bharat is stuck in a remote village without a network. Well, he's in Delhi. I'm not sure how remote a village that is. Girish says, how justified do you think Australia were for dropping Head? Very justified. He's never made runs away from home. He's never made runs against the spinning ball. He struggles in Asia. They're extremely justified. Anyone who's coming at this from, he played well in Australia, therefore it's his spot to lose, I just don't think that's how Test cricket should be played anymore. To go back to the Rahul point, these players aren't being prepared to be successful enough as it is to suddenly think that because Head made runs on a Gabba wicket, which was dodgy, that he's going to be able to make them in Asia against Ashwin. In all truth, if Head had played all 4 tests and he averaged more than 10 against Ashwin, I would have considered that a victory. I'd still consider it a victory if he makes any runs against Ashwin, any serious runs against Ashwin over the course of the series. I would consider that a victory because I just don't see how he's going to score against him. I think Warner's a much better player of spin, and Warner is a much better player of off spin specifically, and he can't play Ashwin. So I've got no problem with dropping Head. The problem with dropping Head is once Green was not available, Head gives them 2 things. He does give them that. Maybe he's more of a 6th bowling option than a 5th bowling option, but Marnus is probably a 7th bowling option. So he would have given them overs, would have allowed them to rotate their spinners a little bit more, which would have meant that when Jadeja and Akshar were batting together, Lyon and Murphy wouldn't have been as tired. That's a really interesting thing. The other thing is, of course, that, if you're putting Renshaw in, even if you're saying Renshaw's a better player of spin than Head, you're still picking someone who hasn't played in a very, very long time, throwing him into the middle order and just hoping it's going to work. If you're going to do that, I think you can make an argument you might as well have done it with Head. But it's not why they lost the test match or anything, right? Like, it's just not. Let's see, what else have we got here? What limits Warner from being... Oh, Girish again. Sorry, everyone. What limits Warner from being successful on the subcontinent? He doesn't make runs away from home. So I think the better question really is, why does Warner not make runs away from home? Is there something to do with the pace that the ball comes on that he enjoys? Is it that Australia doesn't get a lot of lateral movement? And when he goes away, he's either getting seam or he's getting spin? I find it interesting that I think the place where he made the most runs away from home was UAE, which is a place where probably sideways movement is not something that you get, but you do have to factor in low bounce and other issues playing there. And probably patience is the other one playing there. And he overcame that, and I wouldn't have thought. I think he would prefer the ball to come onto the bat a little bit more. So that's an interesting thing. But the lack of lateral movement, perhaps there, was interesting. The other place where he's made runs is South Africa. I'm doing this off the top of my head. But that first series he made runs against South Africa was, and I'd have to look at his overall record there, and obviously it's a bit, coloured by Sandpaper Gate and fighting with Quinton de Kock and everything else. But my memory of that first series where he made runs in South Africa was that he got dropped like 17 times. That's probably an overstatement, but it did feel like his record was bloated in South Africa from that point. So the real question is why Warner doesn't play runs overseas and make runs overseas. That's probably only something he could answer. Maybe he's, old batting coach Trent Woodhill, someone like that. But consistently now, I think we have enough proof that in red ball cricket, he doesn't have that game. In white ball cricket, it's really interesting because he is a good player of spin and white ball cricket, and he does handle that. And whether that's, again, the lack of that sideways movement, I don't know. Well, Vedanga wasn't supposed to be a clickbait title. It was supposed to be literally my first question to Bharat, but as we've talked about, he can't get online. So it's not so much a clickbait title as it was going to be a piss take of Bharat, but unfortunately we didn't get there. And it was I just wanted him to talk through his experience. I think it's really interesting as a journalist when you become sort of the center of a storm. And, obviously I've had a couple in my career before, small ones and micro ones and larger ones. And, it's really interesting when you do something like that and it blows up. And I've had silly ones and sensible ones and everything else. But yeah, it was really a chance for him to talk through what had happened there. But sadly, I was going to say he's watching this, but his Wi-Fi is so bad, he probably can't even see this. I'll just take a couple more. Let's have a look what else we've got here. Udeli bit for wicket. AJ said, should Umesh Yadav play instead of Siraj? I thought Siraj bowled well from sort of limited opportunities. They obviously didn't need him that much. He took an early wicket, which I suppose is one of your main jobs in India. I thought there was one other spell where I thought he was quite good. I mean, I like Umesh, but Siraj is a better bowler than him and also someone worth investing in the future. I think you probably want Siraj to play as much as possible, get as much as experience, whereas Umesh is probably someone now whose career will be coming in occasionally when there are injury concerns. I don't think he's a frontline bowler. I certainly wouldn't change the team based on anything there. Raj says the test match being shifted to a new venue after that. After the tour is one game down, how much does this affect a touring team mentally? Has it happened before? I think it was on the cards as in Australia during the Ashes. Yeah, I mean, these things happen. We've seen, I suppose, what's the most dramatic one was the test match in the West Indies where they had to use the second ground in Antigua, was it? I think it was Antigua. Yeah, they went back to the rec ground because the facilities at the first ground were not adequate. It's probably it. I'm trying to think. I think there's another couple of so these things happen. It's one thing that should be pointed out, especially in in cricket, is that the pitch and the ground and the conditions and everything else, you kind of have to adapt to what happens anyway. So there've been lots of pitches in that World Cup, in that last World Cup, that didn't play traditionally the way that pitches like them would play, right? So Melbourne was a very good example of that. Hobart was probably a very good example of that, right? So teams came into that World Cup thinking, India came into that World Cup thinking, oh, we're going to smack the ball everywhere. And then they saw the ball seam around a little bit and they completely changed the way they played. Whereas England were willing, got done over by one of the seaming pitches. And then were willing to come back to it later on. That's part of winning big series. And it's probably less so in test series because these things don't happen quite as often, because usually what happens is you have a lot of time to prepare, but things happen. I don't have any particular issues with that. We're seeing this more and more. I suppose some of it is also partly COVID related as well. The system is probably a little bit more different than it has been, but we've certainly seen test venues change before. I don't think it's a particularly big issue. In some ways, I wonder if it helps Australia because, they're just going to turn up to a pitch and play on it, maybe, rather than being as fascinated as they might have been before. D says, Steve Smith was not out in the last innings. Do you think a century is coming in the next match? Look, I thought he batted really well in the first innings. He was bowled off a no ball in the second innings, which is worth remembering. He's been bowled through the gate twice. One was a no ball, and obviously one was not a no ball. So in both of those situations, that's an issue. I've always thought that, a bit like KP, against left arm finger spin, this coming across the line style that he has is a real issue. And we know it's been talked about as a weakness at times before, but I don't think specifically, it's not one of those weaknesses that is going to bring down his career, because he's faced enough a left arm finger spin. But I do think if he's facing Harath in Sri Lanka, or Jadeja in India, I do think it becomes a bigger issue. But that all said, I did think he batted really, really well in this series. In that test. I have no idea if he's going to make 100, of course. Why can't I? Oh, just some super chats coming through. Ashwin says, is Bharat's visa delayed? Well, I'm assuming he doesn't need a visa, does he? I don't know how NRIs work these days, but I'm assuming he just has a passport. I still have my Australian passport, even though I live in England. But he might have an Australian passport and live in Australia. I have no idea. I tell you what's really his biggest problem seems to be Wi-Fi and ice cream. I'm not joking. I have to go back through his messages, but I'm pretty sure he had an allergic reaction to ice cream last night, and that's why he couldn't do the podcast. So if you want to go on Twitter and pick on him, I would never condone that kind of bullying, but it's a hell of an ice cream headache. Run with another super chat. Huge thanks to everyone for sending those as well. I don't know what to think of KL Rahul's form. Does Yo-Yo describe a selection criterion or his form? Frustrating for the fans and definitely for the selectors when there are so many youngsters around. Yeah, as I said, Rama, I'm doing this big video on him. In fact, I was literally writing it when I thought I'd come on and just chip in for Bharat, take the blow for Ice Cream Boy. It's really, really interesting. The only period he plays a long period in the team is 2016 to 2019. Everything else has been in and out. But that 2016 to 2019, he's still not spectacular. I think he averages 36 in that period, and he averages 30 for the rest of the time. But there's some really interesting stuff in it, that we'll go through for the video. And one of them is that most players build their record by making runs at home, right? That's a really, really solid way of building your record. And he's played, I don't have the numbers in front of me, it's probably on my screen, but I think he's played like 66 to 70% of his matches away from home. And you can still argue, and I think it is worth arguing, that he's not averaged enough away from home. But his actual record at home, I think he averages 44, 45. If he played quite a few more test matches, he's probably averaging 37, 38, 39 overall. You could still argue that that's not great, but in modern cricket, that's probably closer to where a lot of players are averaging these days, right? Especially it's a pace playing pandemic from that point of view. I think I think from that point of view, there should be proper questions about him. But as I said before, fantastic record opening in England. I think he's getting a bit of a bump over some of the other players, and it's a really interesting thing that I've been working on because Indian cricket has really become whoever the hot young thing is, pick them, and then the minute they fail, turf them. I mean, Prithvi Shaw is obviously a top quality batter, right? He didn't make any runs in Australia, and he's done. And so I do think that there is a possible problem with it where you actually need to trust the players a little bit more and pick them for a little bit longer. And that brings in the issues of the especially when the media and the former players and then also the social media is on your back. That's a really hard thing to do. And I've talked about this with Indian cricket in general. It's almost an impossible situation going ahead. And I'm not sure the best way I'm just not sure the best way to handle that. Ashwin says, one day you'll pronounce my name. If you guys want me to pronounce your name correctly, and whatever it is, if you do have a name, please put it in the question. There are, so many different variations of the same names. I'm not particularly good at pronouncing words, let alone names. We try and work on it as much as we can. Obviously for the lives though, this comes up. I'm just trying to deal with it as best I can. But yeah, if anyone has a tricky name and they want me to say it properly, I'm more than happy to do that. You might have to do it every time. I've got more names written down on my 2 whiteboards than probably anyone else ever has. Vuyani says, who would win a game between 11 Jadejas and 11 Ashwins? The instinctive answer would be Jadeja because he's a better batter, but Jadeja is left-handed. Ashwin is undefeated against left-handers. Well, I think you have to go deeper than that. This is a great super chat, by the way. Absolutely fantastic question. Hopefully, if Cheyenne's watching, he'll probably try and make a whole video out of this. But okay, so we have to go pretty deep within this. So if you had, my guess is that Ashwin is going to be a more formidable opponent all the way through the innings with the ball than Jadeja is. And it also depends on where you're playing. I would have assumed, based on where you're playing, that will play a big difference because Ashwin's batting is obviously far better at home than it is away, whereas Jadeja's batting probably holds up a little bit more. But Jadeja's bowling doesn't hold up as much away from home. I'm going to go with, based on the fact that Test cricket is generally won by the better bowling attack, and that Ashwin, but then again, Jadeja bowling to Ashwin is still a pretty good matchup, isn't it? I was going to go with Ashwin, and now I'm doubting myself already. That is an absolutely fantastically weird question. I am going to go with Ashwin based on the fact that he will work out a way to win. Well, he will have thought Jadeja will turn up and be very, very good. Whereas Ashwin will have been thinking about it this game for months on end. I mean, it's probably Ashwin who creates the cloning machine to make this happen, right? So on that case, I would go with that. Oh, I just seen this is. Oh, I like where this is going. Amar says, but Jadeja is a better fielder. I love it, but who's the better catcher? It might still be Jadeja, of course. From that perspective. Great that now people are chipping in with Bharat's visa will be processed in an instant. He will be having an OCI card, overseas Indian card, and he can vote in the Indian elections too. Just to point out, he's already in India, so it's not a visa issue. It really is a Wi-Fi issue. But thank you to everyone. Look, hopefully I've made up for the fact that there is no Bharat. I'm going. I'm going to answer this last question, and then I'm going to go. But thanks to everyone. Really sorry that we couldn't make this a proper show, but I'm sure Bharat will be around soon. And certainly after, he owes me a couple of episodes now, so I might even make him come back very quickly. But I'll answer 2 more questions before I go, because that's quite interesting as well. Ambrish says, Hayden is in India doing commentary. Even at his age, he would have batted better than the current lot. Does the Australian team not pick his brain for advice? Okay. I mean, they've got plenty of advice. That's not the problem here. Hayden averaged whatever it was, 80 or 90 in his first time batting in India. and then averaged in the 30s the next 2 times, if I'm not mistaken. It's tough. It's not a natural thing. The first time he prepared, like probably no one had ever prepared for one particular challenge before. Got really good at it, and when he came back, Harbhajan and Kumble had thought about how to bowl at him a little bit better. He probably caught everyone a bit off guard that first time as well. I mean, he wasn't a particularly good test player at that time, so India wouldn't have been thinking about him as someone they had to worry about. So I've got no problem with with Hayden not playing. They can pick his head. The one thing I would say is, if you go to a player now and talk to, there are some things that always going to work when you're playing spin. For instance, your interception points. You want your interception points to be as far forward as possible or as far back as possible, right? I think that's very, very fair. That's not going to change. There are other little things about your hands and playing against the spin and playing with the spin and how to sweep and where to sweep from. But Matt Hayden played before DRS. Everything that happened before DRS doesn't really count anymore, because playing the ball spinning away from you has completely changed before DRS and after DRS. I would say with Hayden, he probably would have had to react to that a little bit, because the umpires were already starting to change the way they gave the decisions. But even so, there's only so much you can help with. Just last one. Subadit says, how do you make the data visualization so quickly? What are your tools of the trade? I mean, obviously, I get the data from a million different places. We use Canva. We use Flourish. Canva, Flourish. Am I missing one? Yeah, Canva and Flourish are the two main ones we use. I think that's right. And we go about that. We're trying to make them as readable as possible on smartphones. Sometimes it's not possible. We have limitations. Even within the paid software, we have limitations. Eventually we'd like to get to a point where you have someone who can make all this stuff for us, but we just don't have the money to be able to hire anyone to do that at the moment. And so between the three of us now, we try and make the graphics as readable as possible and as clear as possible to get the message across. I mean, the most important thing is the story, right? So I want you to be able to see this so that you can so you can be like, oh, okay, well, he's showing this because of this. And we try and make them as clear as possible. We could make them cooler looking. If you look at someone like Kirk Goldsberry, who does the NBA stuff, he does really cool looking stuff. But he's just going up on a screen, and you can spend forever looking at them as on screen for on average between 12 seconds and a minute, maybe. There are some that we obviously show a little bit longer, like you've seen with the women's videos, which is a really, really interesting one from that perspective, where we have things on the screen for a little bit longer. But generally, they're not on the screen that long, so it has to be clear. People have to understand them and everything else. But yeah. And just to finish, Wheel of Time says, would have loved to see Jarrod in India covering this series. So the main reason I'm not in India is because I get paid more. I'm getting paid more to cover India. I'm getting paid more to cover New Zealand, England, which is a small test series. So it just wasn't financially viable. Again, it's why we asked for super chats, right? We're trying to get to the point where we can get more and more sponsors, and we can get more money coming in, and we're selling videos to other companies so that we can pick which series we want to cover, and we don't. And although to be fair, with New Zealand and England, it's directly overlapping with India, Australia, but usually I would have just covered India, Australia, I would have thought in this time. But being that I keep saying India, New Zealand, England is going on, and I'm getting paid to cover that. That's basically why I'm not in India at the moment. But I haven't traveled much since coronavirus anyway. But I'm assuming that sort of stuff will change in the not too distant future. But anyway, thank you to everyone for answering questions. Really sorry again about Bharat, and he owes me a couple now, so I'm sure he'll be on soon. But just a huge thanks to everyone who was waiting out, and we think of this as like a warm hug from me for all the support that I've got from all of you so far. And we saw you waiting in the comments patiently, a lot of you, impatiently, some of you as well, of course. And we were working on it as much as we could. We couldn't get it to work, but I thought I'll just pop in and chat to you anyway. But a big thanks to everyone. Oh, someone's just said England versus New Zealand is going to get washed out. That's okay, because A, I still get paid, and B, it means I'll be awake anyway for India, Australia. So that's more than fine. Huge thanks to everyone, and I'll see you again soon. There's a bunch of videos that we're working on. So I'm trying to think when the test series starts. So New Zealand, England must start first. So we'll probably have maybe a video or two from there. But there's also heaps of other India Australia content that we're still working on as well. And there's obviously quite a few other Women's World Cup content that we're doing. And if you haven't seen that, go and check some of that out. It's really cool. We've got about another 3 or 4 really cool videos on that due to come. One of them is on women and leg spin. So very excited to get that one out. Anyway, I'm going to go for now, and I'll see you again next